Of course, if everyone else wakes up there too, there might be some difficult questions asked, but anything's better than the Queen. There was a rushing, rattling noise behind her. She turned and saw the sea disappearing very quickly. It was pulling back down the shore. As she watched, rocks and clumps of seaweed rose above the surf, and then were suddenly high and dry. "Ah," she said after a moment, "it's all right. I know what this is. It's the tide. The sea does this. It goes in and out every day." "Aye," said Rob Anybody. "Amazing. It looks like it's pouring away through a hole." About 50 yards away, the last rivulets of sea water were disappearing over an edge, and some of the Pixies were already heading towards it. Tiffany suddenly had a moment of something that wasn't exactly panic. It was a lot slower and nastier than panic. It began with just a nagging little doubt that said, "Isn't the tide a bit slower?" The teacher, Wonders of the Natural World, One Apple, hadn't gone into much detail, but there were fish flapping on the exposed seabed, and surely the fish in the sea didn't die every day. "I think we'd better be careful," she said, trailing after Rob Anybody. "Why, that's nigh as though the water's rising," he said. "When does the tide come back?" Not for hours, I think," said Tiffany, feeling the slow, nasty panic getting bigger. "But I'm not sure this—" "Tons of time, then," said Rob Anybody. They'd reached the edge where the rest of the Pixies were lined up. A little bit of water still trickled over their feet, pouring down into the gulf beyond. It was like looking down into a valley. At the far side, miles and miles away, the retreating sea was just a gleaming line. Below them, though, were the shipwrecks. There were a lot of them, galleons and schooners and clippers, masts broken, rig hanging, hulls breached, lay strewn across the puddles in what had been the bay. The Nac-Mac-Feagles, as one Pixie, sighed happily. "Sunken treasure! Aye, gold! Bullion! Jews!" "What makes you think they've got treasure in?" said Tiffany. The Nac-Mac-Feagles looked amazed, as if she'd suggested that rocks could fly. "There's got to be treasure in them," said Daft Willie. "Otherwise, what's the point of letting them sink?" "That's right," said Rob Anybody. "There's got to be gold in sunken ships, otherwise it wouldn't be worth fighting all them sharkies and octopuses and stuff. Stealing treasure fra the ocean's bed, that's about the biggest, best thieving ever." And now what Tiffany felt was real, honest panic. "That's a lighthouse," she said, pointing. "Can you see it? A lighthouse, so ships don't run into the rocks. Right, understand? This is a trap made just for you. The Queen's still around." "Maybe just go down and have a look inside one a wee ship," said Rob Anybody meekly. "No, because—" Tiffany looked up. A gleam had caught her eye. "Because the sea is coming back," she said. What looked like a cloud on the horizon was getting bigger and glittering as it came. Tiffany could already hear the roar. She ran back up the beach and got her hands under Roland's armpits so that she could drag him to the lighthouse. She looked back, and the Pixies were still watching the huge surging wave. And there was Wentworth, watching the wave happily, and bending down slightly so that, if they stood on tiptoe, he could hold hands with two Feagles. The image branded itself on her eyes, the little boy and the Pixies, all with their backs to her, all staring with interest at the rushing, glittering, sky-filling wall of water. "Come on!" Tiffany yelled. "I was wrong. This isn't the tide. This is the Queen." Sunken ships were lifted up and spun around in the hissing mountain of surf. "Come on!" Tiffany managed to haul Roland across her shoulder and, staggering across the rocks, made it to the lighthouse door as the water crashed behind her. For a moment the world was full of white light, and snow squeaked underfoot. It was the silent, cold land of the Queen. There was no one around, and nothing to see except snow, and in the distance the forest. Black clouds hovered over it. Ahead of her, and only just visible, was a picture in the air. It showed some turf and a few stones lit with moonlight. It was the other side of the door back home. She turned round desperately. "Please," she shouted. It wasn't a request to anyone special. She just needed to shout. "Rob! William! Willie! Wentworth!" Away towards the forest there was the barking of the grim hounds. "Got to get out," muttered Tiffany. "Got to get away." She grabbed Roland by the collar and dragged him towards the door. At least he slid better on the snow. No one and nothing could try to stop her. The snow spilled a little way through the doorway between the stones and onto the turf, but the air was warm and alive with nighttime insect noises. Under a real moon, under a real sky, she pulled the boy over to a fallen stone and sat him up against it. She sat down next to him, exhausted to the bone, and tried to get her breath back. Her dress was soaked with the smell of the sea. She could hear her own thoughts a long way off. They could still be alive. It was a dream after all. There must be a way back. All I have to do is find it. I've got to go back in there. The dog sounded very loud. She stood up again, although what she really wanted to do was sleep. The 3 stones at the door were a black shape against the stars, and as she watched they fell down. The one on the left slipped over slowly, and the other 2 ended up leaning against it. She ran over and hauled at the tons of stones. She prodded the air around them in case the doorway was still there. She squinted madly, trying to see it. Tiffany stood under the stars alone and tried not to cry. "What a shame," said the Queen. "You've let everybody down, haven't you?"